Okay, so we're back. Now we've finished our chisels, and what we're going to work on today is going to be the actual carving that will allow us to input various images into this little engine that will then turn it into wood carving that we can move around. So I'm going to go new substance graph, and we'll call this carving. And we've got our situation here. I'm going to, actually we don't need to do anything about this because again we're only going to have the grayscale output, which we'll worry about later. Now if we take a look at the original test material that I made and we look at our carving node, you'll see that we have 4 different image inputs, and we can switch out our various images in here simply by putting in another grayscale image, and we tell it what to do with these images in here. In order to do that, let's get back to our carving. In order to do that, I need to have image inputs. So I'm going to go add node, grayscale image input, and we're going to have 4 of these. It'll automatically put the underscores in there for me, so I just copy it with the spaces, and this way I only have to do it the one time. And we're going to make 3 more of these, and we'll name them accordingly. So now they appear here as input images, and that means that whatever, is input here is going to get plugged into whatever we have going on between this and the outputs. Now, there's a problem here as far as building this thing because these currently have no information. And it's a lot easier to do this if you can see what you're doing. So the way I do this, I've already got the resources in here. I'm just going to pick out 4 different resources. Oh, I think I'm going to make sure they're all different. Those look all different. And we'll make each one of these a grayscale. And then I just line them up as proxies. So we're just going to line them up like this. And it doesn't really matter what's with what because it's just a way of being able to see what you're doing. Okay. Right. So let's actually begin building this. I'm not going to start with these things. Again, if we go back to our original test material, the way I designed it was that there are 2 images that get put into a border, and then there are 2 images that have no border. So the first thing we're going to build is that border. I'm going to pull out a uniform color, and we're going to make it white. I'm then going to pull out a transform 2D and make a couple of copies of it. I'm going to take this one and we are going to make it so it does not tile because we're just going to make a shape here. And I'm holding down the control key and I'm going to make sort of the basic template for my, how thick I want my border to be. Probably something like that. Now, that's only one of them, and I actually want 2. I'm going to do 1 for each one. I'm not going to move this one around, because if I ever want to change the size of my border, I can do it here, and it's not going to affect, it's only going to affect the, the width of it. So we'll hook those up. And then I'm going to get a blend node, and we'll use a lighten blend. And I'm going to set up how wide I want the border to be. So I'm actually setting it up, but I'm making sure that I'm doing it in the middle. So let's start with this top one. And I'm going to I don't want to offset the X, I want to offset the Y. Make sure I'm looking at this. I'm going to single click back on that, and we're going to offset the Y. I'm only going for half the width right now because I want this in the middle. I want that black area to be like centered. So let's call it 0.125. So that'd be like a quarter. And then this one we can do negative 0.125. and that means that, the center is actually in here. Because we're going to use this setup for each, we're going to share this for both borders. Now, right now, they're super flat. We have no normals on. If we made normals, it would be like a straight edge, and I don't want that. So I'm going to get a bevel node, and I'm going to duplicate it. Because what I'm going to have is the, the bottom, which will be sort of a positive bevel. So this is the entire width of my frame, probably something like that. And then on top, what I want is something that's going to go on top of that. So like a little extra divot, and we can fine tune them right now. I ended up having to use a levels in here because we're going to use a light and blend. So like this, and like this. Actually, let's try multiply. Nope. Okay, let's do a copy. More than one way to skin a cat. We'll use that as the mask. There we go. That works. And then I think I really want that to sit on top, so this I'll lighten up. So it just makes that border more interesting from a normals perspective. See if I can't do better from in here. Let's try this. Yeah, I think I like that better because it gives me a sharper line in through there. Anyway, make it do what you want it to do. It's just fancying it up a little bit. And finally, what I want is a gradient map that's going to let me make a mask of the whole thing. Because if I use this, you'll see it's actually smaller. The white area is smaller than, what this bevel is doing. So we have to kind of redo it again. And I'm going to take the gradient here, and I'm just going to fix it so that it's pretty much just black. And we're going to need an inverse of this as well. So we might as well get that out there too. Oh, I forgot to change this to a grayscale. There we go. Okay, so this is sort of the basic blocks for our border. And for the moment, we're going to leave it like this. Okay, so the next thing I want to work on is doing, the images that are going to go inside these bands. So the way I did it, I designated image 1 and image 2 as those images. So we'll work on image 1, and then we'll just copy it out for image 2 because it's essentially going to do the same thing. First thing, let's go ahead and make our input parameters. And I actually want this to be a float 3. And we're going to have the X be size, and then this is going to be location X and location Y. And this will allow us, everything can just, each one can have its own set of sliders instead of having like a bajillion different things as far as sliders go. I'm going to copy this, I'm going to paste it, and we'll just do the same thing for 2. All right, so we have our input parameters, and now we need to actually start manipulating these images. So I'm going to get a transform 2D here, and I'm going to set it so that it tiles only on the horizontal. So as we bring it down, oops, it's only tiling on the horizontal. All right, so with it set up like that, just like I did right now, holding down the shift key and making it smaller, or holding down control shift and doing it in the center, by setting the tiling mode, we are actually just changing the size of the images in this band. So what I want to do is decide what sort of the minimum maximum is, that the sizes that I want these things as they fit into these borders. So we're just going to do a rough and tumble estimate here. I'm going to take this and we'll do this, and we'll just, we can even just do this, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift so I can see what I'm doing. And all right, so now remember, it doesn't have to necessarily just be this image. So I can say that that's probably the biggest size I want it. I wonder if this, these are different images than I used for my notes. I hope it's the same because, no, we're gonna go ahead and use what I used for my notes. I had 4. Yeah. So that was like the biggest size. I think I was actually using this one. Yeah, that's why. So, it really depends. But that's how I did my math. So I'm just going to copy my notes, but you can adjust those sizes once we go into the concept, adjust them as needed. So let's actually start making this transform matrix. And again, if you haven't done these transform matrices with me, I'm going to assume you have. I have plenty of videos on it. Essentially, what we need to end up with, all this stuff translates to this float 4, and we're going to make a float 4 that's going to get it to do what we want it to do. Okay, so it's back to its default, which is a float 4 that looks like 1001. So if we want to tile this, the bigger these numbers are, the more tiles you're fitting in there, the smaller the thing becomes. So if you want your sliders to go from like smallest to biggest, you also have to reverse the direction that these numbers take in your slider. And that's what we're going to do first. So let's get our variable, our float 3, and we're dealing with image 1. The first thing we want to do is swizzle out the appropriate float. And in this case, it happens to be x. So that's good. Now, image 1 is a number running from 0 to 1. And this is where we're going to reverse it. Going to get the number 1. And we're going to subtract whatever this is from the number 1, because this is also a number that's going between 0 and 1. So that's the whole direction of travel taken care of. The next thing I want to do is, again, we're dealing from a number from 0 to 1, so I want to multiply it. Now, in this particular case, I ended up multiplying it by 4, because that was the thing that I wanted to start with. So now this is a number running not from 0 to 1, but a number running from 1 to 4. But it's starting from 0. And I don't want it to do that. I want it to start at 4 and get smaller from there, because remember, as these numbers are going up, stuff is getting smaller. So 4 is actually my lowest, my smallest number. So we're going to get an addition, and we're just going to add it again to number 4. But here's the next issue. I want this to tile correctly, and I only want it to move I want them to move like they're integers. There's probably a couple of different ways of doing this, but I just think the simplest thing is to cast it to an integer and then cast it back to a float, because we actually need it as a float. So what this is going to do is that as you're sliding through decimal places, it's going to just read it as if it's the number you just passed through. And so that, like, if you start at 1, and then you're like 1.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up until you get like 1.9, it's going to read as 1. And then the minute you hit 2, it's going to switch over to 2. And now all we need to do is turn it into our float 4 configuration here. So we're going to need a 0. And we're going to need a couple of vector float 2s and a vector float 4. So we have result, 0, 0, result. Right, so we have it set at 0 right now, I believe. Oh, it's set at 1. Actually, we don't want it set. Oh, 0 will do. Okay, so that's the smallest one, which is okay. Oh, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. And then as we go up from 0 and we pass through those numbers, it's going to get to our biggest one. Now, when we're on our biggest size, you will notice that it's kind of coming over the lip here, and we don't really want that, because we want this border to cut it out. And what that'll allow you to do is put even bigger images in here, and they can, they can really fill it out. So what we need to have happen here is to just cut those things out. So that is what this is for. Oh, wrong one. That's what this is for. And that's going to be the sort of end result of this first image. But there's more. I think we might need that again. Right now, they're like really spaced out. I would love to have another set in between. So why don't we go ahead and do that? Oh, we forgot to, this is at 512. Let's make this relative to parent. And we'll make this a light and blend. And we can see what happens when we start moving the offset here along the X. So it kind of fills it out for us. But if we take a look at what we've made and we start to bring it down, the spacing gets all weird. So I want to be able to address that as well. And we're going to put a separate, we're going to put a separate function on here. It's quick and dirty. We're talking about like averages, because you want this to be something that will work with most images. So again, it's the principle of the thing. Your numbers may end up being different if you're using different images, but the idea remains the same. So let's go to our offset here, and what we need to have happen is this. We need to get this X, because that's really all we're talking about here. It has to move according to what's going on with the size. All right. Again, we're going to get our image 1 float 3, and we're going to swizzle out our X. You know what? Let's go back and take a look at it in here. I'm going to get another one. I came up with a set of numbers, and I want to show you how I came up with this set of numbers. We're currently setting, I want to make sure that this is, okay, this is at its largest right now. I'm going to come back in here, and we had this at 0.125. That's my high end. All right, so I wrote that number down. Then I went back in here, and I brought it down to 0. And then I came back into my transform, and I moved it until I liked the spacing. And right now it's 0.6, but yeah, that's what I had. It's 0.06, which is where I ended up before. I then subtracted 0.06 from 0.125, which is our high end, and I ended up with 0.065, which is the unit number between the smallest and the biggest. And that's where I'm coming up with the numbers that we're going to do right now. So we've got this number from 0 to 1 coming in. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my units. So every time for each, it's just making it smaller. So this is 0.065 is my unit size. And then I don't want it to start from 0. I want it to start from 0.06, which is what my lowest number on that slider was. So we're going to get another float, and we're going to call this 0.06. And this time we're going to add it. And that's going to create the starting point for these, for these increments to go up. And finally, we need a float 2. And here we're only talking about the X, and then I'm going to get a 0 for my Y, because that's not going to move at all. And that will be our output node. And fingers crossed, what this means, I think it's on this one. Yeah, hold on. I just want to make sure I've got the right node plugged in here. Yes, that's this one. Okay, so we have to re-plug this in here. Oh, in here. Let's see if it works. Oh, no, does it even work? It's not. Oh, because I'm not blending it against anything. There we go. Okay. Seems to be working. So that's 0, and then as it goes up, they're staying more or less the same. I mean, you can kind of, there's like incremental movement between jumping the sizes, but to be perfectly honest, I can live with that. Right, so those are the shapes. This one we're going to get rid of, we don't need that. And we can now just put that in there. Okay, so let's get another blend node. And now we have our border. And we have our image. And we'll use a lighten blend. And there we go. So all we need to do now is copy this out for the second one. It's not a very good image to use for this. I don't think this isn't going to give a nice carving. I just randomly dragged stuff in there. I have no idea what it was. We won't use this later. I mean, it's fine for now, just to see what we're doing. In fact, you know what? Let's use something. We can use this for the freestanding ones. This kind of drives me crazy a little bit. Do that. We'll just bring this one down because it won't matter so much. Okay, you see and how this one can fill it out and it can go above the borders and it still looks good. So now we've got both of these things sitting in the middle and we have to fix it so that we can slide them up on the Y. And for that we're going to need a couple more transforms. Actually, we'll just do the one and we can copy it out again. And here, I mean, we want to be able to move it all the way, oh, sorry, wrong one. Oh, we have to make sure, oh yeah, let's, I'm kind of glad I did that. I forgot to change this. We want this to tile, yeah, we want to tile all the way. So let it tile up and down. And the Y wants to go from 0 to 0.5 to go in this direction, and from 0 to negative 0.5 to go in that direction. So we have to create a function that's going to translate our float 3 to do this on this float 2. So let's get our image 1. Oh, we forgot to change one. Okay. Oh, I got a constant. Let's try that again. And we'll get our image 1. And now I want to swizzle out my Y and my Z because those are the ones that are dealing with location X. So Y corresponds to my X location and Z corresponds to my Y location. So we'll change this one to a Y and we'll change this one to a Z. And I want it to go through 0, so I don't want it to go from 0 to 1, which is what this number is doing. I want it to go from 0.5 to negative 0.5. And to do that is pretty simple, because all we need to do is, oh, I'll subtract 0.5 from it. So when it's at 1, it's at 0.5, and when it's at 0, it's actually at negative 0.5. And we'll vector this back into a float 2. And now, when we move our slider here, so this is our Y right here, it's gonna go through that 0 for us. I realized we didn't, when we copied this, we have to change some stuff around. Namely, the variable in here. I think that's it. And then we duplicate this, put it in here, and we will not forget to change our variable. All right. So those are our bands done. And we can blend them together using a lighten blend. And there we go. So we have 2 of the elements in there. Next, we're going to deal with the images that don't have a border. And we're going to do those a little bit differently. So they're going to have input parameters that are a little bit different. what did I call these? Image 2, so we'll call this image 3. It's also going to be a float 3, but instead of size, we're going to have tile. I mean, call it size. It's just going to do it. Let's just call it size just to keep things simple for the end user. It's going to do it differently though. And this again is going to be location X and location Y. All right. To do these, I decided I was going to use a tile generator. And then once it was done in here, again, to create a band using the transform 2D. So that's going to have to, I don't know, either no tiling or horizontal tiling. I'll keep things safe, do horizontal tiling. And what this does, I mean, we can just keep it the way it is. I'm holding that control key. As I move this down, it squidges my image. So I need to make sure that whatever I do in here is square. So again, I'm also going to tile in here. So I'm going to make my bands, you know, this way. The stuff that's happening in here is size-wise is pretty much the same thing, but we can tile the images in here smaller. So while we're going to decide on a width here, I decided on 5 tiles by 5, so we can enter it manually in here. I decided on 5 and 5 and leaving it just without any variation. If you want to, you can apply the same ideas that we had here with the sizes here to have these guys move as well. So you could actually increase the width of this band according to tiling, but you just got to remember that if you want your images to remain in proportion, that has to be, you know, it has to be tiled as square. By running it through a tile generator, your image is made continuous through here rather than jury-rigging this thing up here, is essentially what it does. And it doesn't have borders. So it's a different way of doing this kind of thing. But by all means, you can mix and match the way these functions work. Right, so let's get to actually getting this thing doing what it needs to do. First, let's input an image. Next, we're going to go into our actual tile generator and start using that image. Right now, it's using a square. Sorry, a brick. Now, I've got this set to the size I want. And I'm going to decide now what is the smallest tile I want in here. And what I came up with was 10. I really don't want it any smaller than what that was. And then if we do it 1 and 1, it's going to end up being the same kind of look as up here, but without anything in between. So, you know, it's just different. Now, I want these to do their thing squared. So I'm going to make sure that this X amount and Y amount, which are actually 2 separate sliders in here, are going to get exactly the same function applied to them. And we can go ahead and do that now. Okay, so we decided that 10 was going to be our maximum number. And we're going to get our float 3, image 3. We're going to vector out, we're going to swizzle float 1. And in the simplest of worlds, we would take the number 10 because we want it to run from 1 to 10. And we would multiply it by that number. And then because it wants an integer, we're going to have to cast that to an integer. You know, let's just copy it first, and no, let's not copy it first because we are going to change this. I just want to show you why. So it's at number 1 now, and then as we make it smaller, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's actually running in the wrong direction. And when we hit the number 0, this 10 gets multiplied by 0, and we end up with absolutely nothing at all. So we're going to have to adjust this so that it does what we want, but this is the basic principle. The first thing we want to do is we want to reverse the direction of that slider. So we're going to get the number 1, and we're going to subtract our x out of there. I want to multiply this, well, I'll show you now. It's at 0. We need to have something happen after this multiplication to make it not be at 0, ever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the number 1 here. And we've solved the problem of it disappearing. However, because we're adding the number 1, we're now running from 1 to 11. And we don't want to go to 11, we want to go to 10. So we're going to bring this down to 9. And problem solved. It's going to run from 0 to 9, always adding the number 1, which in reality makes it run from 1 to 10. And now that we've got this, instead of doing it twice, we're just going to copy this, and we're going to apply it also to the y. And now, as we move our slide, so it's now at the biggest because it's at number 1, and now as we move our slider down, it starts to tile out for us until it gets to its teeniest size. Now, if we don't want it to be quite so teeny-weeny, we can adjust this. We just got to make sure that these numbers are the same. Well, I mean, assuming you want it squared. I think I'm happier with that. In fact, let's even bring it down a little bit more. Now, these leaves are super small. I want to see what one of the big ones looks like with it. Yeah, that's good. All right. And we need to now copy out this input parameter, which we never put in there. And we'll duplicate that. And we'll come in here and we'll change our variables. Okay, so we've dealt with the size, and now we need to have them move up and down like these other guys. And I'm not going to put it on this one. I'm going to use a separate transform. And we're going to go into our offset, empty function, and we're going to do exactly the same thing that we did with the other ones. And our y is for our location x, and our z is for our location y. And because we want them moving through the 0, we're going to do the subtraction thing again. And we'll vector it back into a float too. It's moving along the x, and it's moving along the y. And we can duplicate this, and we can bring it down here, and then just change our input parameters. Right. And we just hook them up. So we'll do a light and blend here. And we'll do another light and blend here. And we're ready to take a look at this on our wood. So I'm just going to take, I guess we'll use the height. We'll get rid of these other guys. And we'll call this carving. And the rest of it stays the same. And we can take a look. So this was our chisels in there. We can bring in our carving, which is our wood. This is our wood right here. So we'll plug that in, and then we can put that in there. I mean, it's not got any height applied to it, it's just normals, but you can see that it's working. I'm seeing a line in here. That's on my borders. I want to go back and double check, make sure all my tiling's correct. I'm going to make this horizontal tiling. Hopefully that'll fix that problem. In fact, I'm going to make all of these horizontal tiling, just make sure. Yeah, that sorted that out. Okay, right. But it's getting the images from in here. It's not getting them, I mean, it's getting the images from carving. It's not getting them from in here. So what we have to do now is go back here and actually hook up our inputs. And I'm going to leave these here because I'm sure we're going to have to come back to it and fool around with it some more as we're making the material. So it's just easier to deal with it with stuff actually in here and not having to bring it back and forth. Let's come back in here. And the bands are still there. The bands will remain. But we can get some images. I don't want that one. And we can start plugging stuff in here. We can also, for example, come into the library and get a shape. It doesn't, you know, we don't have to just do it with bitmaps. We can, let's say, I was fooling around with a crescent, I think, before, and a pyramid when I was messing around with this earlier. So you can put all kinds of shapes in here. Oh wow, what's going on here? We have a problem. Here's the issue. It's getting its information from this guy here, which is at 128. I'm going to make this relative to parent. Yeah, that's better. And we don't have it hooked up in this graph yet, but if we come into the actual carving node, we can start moving these guys around. We can do the size, we can do their location. Do their X locations, their Y locations. So that's the carving done. But what it doesn't deal with is what we're going to need in the next video for actually doing the colors. So we're going to come back in here and we're going to add a couple of extra masks that will allow us to apply color in the final material. I'm just going to replug these guys back in so we can see what we're doing. Right, now we've got the bands done here, but what they're doing is, you know, when we're moving them only in the carving. So the first thing I want to do is just have the bands also move independent, like create a separate mask where we have just the bands moving so that we can have a different stain on the wood if we want. So we can have the wood that is not in these borders be a different color than the wood of the borders. And then we're going to do another one that's going to do the interiors. So it's going to give us the opportunity to have 3 different wood stain types in addition to any colors that we have on the carving itself. And that's really the simple, you know, that's really super simple to do. What we need to do is make sure, you know, we just need to repeat this over and over again. So I'm just going to make a duplicate of this because we're just going to keep using this same transform. And I'm going to do 1 for image 1 and 1 for image 2. I forget which one did we grab up. Okay, so we're going to change this one to image 2. And that's going to give us you know, the bands just moving independently of any carving that happens inside there. And again, we're going to do the same blend for everything, which is a lighten blend. And that's going to give us the bands themselves. And I'm going to get another transform node here. I'm going to make it tile only horizontally. We're going to take this white and we're going to plug it in there as well. And I'm going to grab this blend node just temporarily because I want to create a mask for just the interior. So let's do it the other way. For just the interior of what's going on inside those borders. Bring down the opacity a bit. And I'm going to hold down my control key and I'm just going to get this to where I want it. That's really the simplest thing to do here. So we'll just eyeball it. If you want to leave like a little edge, you can. There. We can get rid of this blend node now. I'm going to leave this guy here. It makes more sense logically. We can just duplicate this and hook that up to in here. And so now we have two more outputs for our color. You know, I'm going to come up here and make a frame. Sometimes they're a little hard to catch, these. I just want to make some more room in here. And we'll call this color zones. And we'll create an output. You know what? Let's just copy this one. Because we've got this, we've got it set up as a height. Well, we'll set these up as masks. And we'll call this border stain. We can duplicate it again, and this one we will call interior stain. And lastly, what we need to do is create zones for the carving. And for that, again, this is all relatively simple stuff. We're going to get a gradient. We're going to turn it into a grayscale. We're going to need a bunch of these, but I'm making some duplicates. So we're going to have one of these for each one of our carvings. You know what? I'm going to simplify my life even more. Let's get it set up on the first one, and then we can just copy it out. Right. So the final thing that's coming out is this chopped up one where we've cut out, you know, we've cut off those borders. So that's what we want the color applied to. So we'll stick that in there. And then we can go into our gradient map. And if it's not black, it's white. You know, and if you want a fade in there, you can put that in there. I'm going to leave it alone. So that's my first one. I'm going to duplicate this out, and that will be my second image. I'm going to keep them in order here. And then we can, these don't get cut off, so I just want to make, yeah. That's the two of them blended, so this is the one we want here. And then this one here. We've got size issues where, okay, I just want to make sure, I'm going to come back into these tile generators here, and I'm going to turn these into relative to parent. And I'm going to do this for every node that is the first node that's coming from whatever these inputs are. Because we don't know what the resolution of those inputs are going to be. So that those two are already set up, I think. And that's going to keep everything at parent size regardless of what's coming in through here. So now what we're getting are just these totally black and white masks. And whatever's the last thing coming out on the carving is just getting masked out here in these gradient maps. Now, one more thing. We're already moving our borderless images here. However, so you know whatever's coming out of here is already getting moved according to, you know, these things. So we don't need to make a set here. But we do need to make a set for these guys because the way we're moving this carving is out here in front, well, it's out here in front of where we took those images. So we're going to have to move them again according to this. So they're all moving on the exact same function. They're just sometimes doing it in different spots in their chain. Let me just go ahead and duplicate this one and just switch that out. So this one is going according to, let's just double check, never hurts. We got image 1 and then the other one is image 2. And these guys, they're already moving, so we don't have to do anything else to them. Oh, except you know what, we're not combining them, so let's get rid of that. And now we just make a couple more outputs. So we've already got these set up as masks, and we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 more. And now all we need to do is rename them. And now, when we come back to our carved wood, we've got all of these additional things in here. I don't like the order these are in. I'm going to switch the order around. So let's go back in here. And for our output images, we can always switch the order we have them at. So we've got carving height and okay. So I like that. Oh, and you know what else we forgot to do was hook these back up to the inputs. Right. Now we are ready to go. We've got our wood, we've got our carvings, we've got our chisel marks, and in the next video what we're going to do is we're going to sort of redo all of this to actually turn it into our final material.